tonight to come out. I mean, this is an amazing turnout given the weather that we're having. And obviously a lot of interest in this subject, which is really important, especially since the coming into law with the cannabis law. And I'm sure everybody has lots of questions, and it certainly does open up a lot for discussion and everything that you have to know as parents. So I'm Danielle Lange, Executive Director from Connections Resource Center, and we basically work to improve access to health and social services for the English-speaking minority in Quebec. So tonight there's a lot of resources here, so please feel free to help yourself, and if you have any questions, also feel free to ask me afterwards. In terms of logistics, you know, there's some snacks at the back of the room, and the washrooms are just around the corner here. So I would really like to thank the school board tonight for helping us to organize this. It really has been a great collaboration. And so we have Erica and Kelley, who are the DART team, and Lisa Palasconi, Director of Complementary Services, and we also have our principals from the Elmer schools. I see Elvin, George, and Ralph, and am I missing somebody? Oh, okay. Okay. As well as a commissioner who's here tonight, Wayne Bailey. So thank you all for coming, and to also introduce our guest tonight, Marley who's from the SQ, and as well as Kieran Sanchi from the Canadian Centre on Substance Use. So lots of information tonight. I hope you enjoy it and get a lot out of it. So again, thank you all for coming out tonight.
All right, thanks guys. Again, I'm just going to say thank you very much. My name is Erica Tomkinson, and so I am one of maybe some of your, if you're here as a parent, you may have heard your child refer to the drug ladies at school. Well, I'm one of them. So I am one of the drug ladies, and this is my colleague Kelley. She's also a drug lady. And we will get into a little bit of that in the future, so don't panic. We're not giving students drugs, okay? So we'll explain our role in a little bit. I hope everybody picked up a green sheet at the front of the room. It just gives you a minute to maybe write down what you know about cannabis, and then maybe things that you're hoping to have answered, so that hopefully you won't have anything else to be answered on that list by the end of our presentation. But if you do, please feel free to, ask those questions at the end. Now, Danielle pointed out that there's resources at that table at the back, which is great. Go to it. Awesome. This table over here, however, on the left, please don't take any of those things. Those are some of our tools that we've collected, okay? So our cannabis use tools. And at the end of the presentation, Kelley and I are going to be around to maybe not demonstrate, okay, but maybe explain how some of those tools work and give you a little bit more information on, that side of the cannabis world. All right, so please feel free to have questions. We absolutely love questions. And yeah, here we go. So as you can see from this slide, Kelley and I are responsible for different sections of the board. So we've taken our school board and basically split it. So if you have a child that attends either one of those high schools or any of the feeder elementary schools, we are responsible for those schools. So if you wanted to have further contact with either Kelley or I, and you're related to whatever, either elementary school or high school, please feel free to contact either one of us. All right? Great. And as you can see, the drug ladies, that's where we are. That's where we're at. All right. Here we go.
So I'm just going to talk about what we do as the drug awareness resource team in our schools and in the community. So we meet with students one-on-one after a drug-related suspension. We also meet with students one-on-one by their request, and that might be a personal concern for themselves. It might be a concern for someone in their family or a concern for a friend, and it might just be about general information regarding various substances. We also do presentations to classes. We do presentations to parents in the community, and we do presentations to our staff. We make connections and we refer to other community organizations. That might be a nurse referral or a therapy referral or a referral to a treatment facility. And we also provide support and resources to the parents of our students and to staff. So that's our role as the DART team or the Drug Awareness Resource Team.
I just want to highlight for you guys why I have a very angry, pointy man in this picture with the claim down here, "Are you on drugs?" So just to give you guys an idea, our approach to drug awareness and prevention within our schools and for our students, it used to be a very accusatory sort of situation. You're on drugs with a very huge negative connotation. I just want to point out that that's not our philosophy and that's not how we go about disseminating our services to our students anymore. How we approach it is a very harm reduction based, it's a very, let's provide our students, our staff, and everybody in our community with as much information as possible, and then people are able to make the best decisions out there. That's truly the way that Kelley and I feel is the best way to have our students make their best choices, is to make sure and to ensure that they have all the information that's out there. That's why Kelley and I try our best to embed ourselves within the school community, going and having lunch, going and making sure that we're in the hallways, making the big joke that we're the drug ladies. We like to, when we introduce ourselves to students, we always give a highlight at the beginning, especially in grade 6 and grade 7. It's like, when you go home today and talk about your day, and you say, "Oh, the drug lady came to my school today," you have to take it a step further, because we don't want angry emails or concerning phone calls, that a lady came giving us drugs today. No, we're the drug ladies because we provide students with information about them, right? And that's how we sort of try to, like I said, embed ourselves within the student body in order for them to feel comfortable. So we don't have that accusatory, sort of very negatively driven idea about this whole thing about substance abuse and use. Okay? Just wanted to clarify that because it is kind of like a weird, random picture. All right. I just want to take us through Cannabis 101 for a few minutes. Okay? So for those of you that know, don't know, there are 3 different types of cannabis. There's indica, there's sativa, and then there's the hybrids, which is a blend of indica and sativa. So I'm referring to the actual cannabis plant, okay? So it's important to understand if we are gonna have a level of understanding about this product, it's important to start with the basics. So as you can see, indica has certain properties that will give you a certain feeling. Sativa has a different set of properties, and then hybrids is sort of somewhere in the middle. The other 2 things I really want to highlight about cannabis is that there's 2 properties that are within this plant that are found in there naturally. Okay, naturally, there's THC, okay, which is an acronym for, as you can see, delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, and that's the thing inside of cannabis that gets us high. So it gives us that euphoric feeling. It's the psychoactive part of the drug. It's the part that gets us high. CBD, or cannabidiol, is the non-intoxicating aspect or extraction of cannabis that we've taken. So because there's 2 sides, there's 2 types of cannabis that are legal now in Canada, it's important to understand that there are 2 separations. Sometimes these 2, and especially previous to recreational legalization, people were really under the impression that medicinal marijuana was legal, it was willy-nilly, if I have it and I can just smoke it anywhere. There were a lot of restrictions, and it's something I used to tell students a lot, or I still continue to tell students. Some parents or some people in the community would say it's medicinal marijuana, when really it's just about getting high, and they just didn't want to come out about that right now. Right? So I just wanted to point out that medicinal marijuana has been legal since 2001, and recreational, as we know, or most of us know, it just became legal in October of 2018. All right. Does anybody have any questions about the basics of cannabis? Because that's really, really like the raw basics. Oh, one thing I do want to point out, sorry, is we talk about it being natural, right? Everybody's like, oh, it's so natural, it's so natural. Well, it's not natural. They have changed it and genetically modified it so many times. I subscribe to some pretty interesting websites, and there's a seed production website that I get alerts from. And there's over 5,000 different types of cannabis plants that you can produce. So it's not natural anymore. The differences between indica and sativa and the hybrids, and there's different levels of THC and CBD, they've really changed and modified it. So I just wanted to highlight that for you guys because it has changed a lot over the years. And something that I always like to point out to students, and it dates me terribly, is I talk about, I'm always like, who's the king of pot? Who's the marijuana king? And everybody's like, Snoop Dogg, and they name all these rappers of today, right? And I'm like, come on, the king of pot. And eventually, with some pull, eventually we get to Bob Marley. Eventually we get there, right? But it does, it dates me. Yes?
Yes, okay, I have a question. You're talking about CBD and THC.
Yes.
For example, my son is 17 years old, he's autistic, and I know a lot of autistic families, actually they're using outside use cannabis or with their son, their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And basically CBD, it's calm down his son, calming hormone release, as THC is to give a bit more energy in a way. Because when you prescribe it, you have to go and see your family doctor, and you can decide, like for example, to have a very high level of CBD and very low level of THC. They can control that depending on the case.
They both need to be present. In order for the CBD to work, you need to have a little bit of THC in order for that balance to happen. Absolutely.
But they can arrange the balance.
Of course.
And also when you use this, like I mean, my son's a bit complicated. Sometimes you give them a pill, you have to chew the pill. But for this case, like how do you prescribe the marijuana? You can use a pill. I mean, you're not going to smoke if you're autistic, but normally you use a pill. Or?
So you can get a prescription medication, so you can get it in a pill form. But what's very popular these days is oil. So you can have it in an oil base, where doctors will prescribe that same ratio of CBD to THC, but it's just it can be administered in an oil.
Is it like a liquid that you drink?
A liquid that you would have like an eyedropper, for example, and you would just drop 1 drop or 2 drops, whatever the prescription requires, and then whatever the doctor decides is the best dosage.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Yes, so Bob Marley. Yes. So anyway, what I like to say is the days of Bob Marley, he's the king of pop. We think of Bob Marley, we think Rasta, it was a part of his culture, his religion, all of that kind of stuff. Well, if we resurrected Bob Marley today and we gave him some of our street weed, some of the weed that our youth are using right now, he would what they call green out. He would become ill because there would be too much THC for his body to process. So this product has changed so much. So in the days of Bob Marley, levels of THC were coming back at anywhere between 3 and 12%. That's the days of Bob Marley, okay? Today's day, where our street weed is coming back anywhere between 35 and all the way up to about 85% THC. So these are the products that our youth are starting to use. So I just wanted to point out that whole concept of, this is a natural thing, and, like we don't need to really worry about it, it's not chemical based, it's not natural, it's been changed and modified, and it's complicated sometimes. But hopefully tonight will give you a little bit of, peace of mind that it's not so complicated. All right, here we go.
All right, so my piece. Now, disclaimer. So because I'm going to be talking about the brain and certain processes and systems in our bodies and using certain terms, I'm going to be referring to my notes so that I am giving you the correct information. Okay? So if it sounds rehearsed, it's because it is. All right. I want to start with a few months ago, I attended a presentation on marijuana and the developing brain that was hosted by the Neuroscience Department at Carleton University. Now, the fascinating gentleman who did the presentation is a colleague of Karen's. His name is Zachary Patterson, right? And his presentation lasted 2 hours. And at the end of it, in his words, he said, this is just the tip of a very complex and fascinating iceberg. So it's just the tip of a very complex and fascinating iceberg. So as you guys may know, I'm not a neuroscience expert, and it would be impossible for me to explain the entire systems in 10 minutes. So I'm just going to touch on the very tip of that iceberg tonight. And I'm just going to share with you some highlights of the information that I took away from the presentation. So I'm going to start with the endocannabinoid system, okay? So the active ingredients in cannabis plant, 2 of which Erica just spoke about, are actually called cannabinoids, or more specifically phytocannabinoids, which means they are plant-derived. They bind and activate specific receptors within our body, okay? Our bodies actually produce their own set of cannabinoids, and these are called endocannabinoids, which means they are produced within, endo meaning within. We actually have an entire cannabinoid system within our bodies that regulates the activity of all cannabinoids in our bodies, okay? And it's responsible for homeostasis, which is a state of balance in our bodies that's necessary for our body to function healthily. There are 2 types of receptors in the endocannabinoid system. We have CB1 receptors and CB2 receptors. Now, CB1 receptors are primarily located in the brain and throughout our nervous system. And this is the receptor that THC easily binds with. We have CB2 receptors that are located primarily in our immune system, and that is the receptor that CBD easily binds to. Okay, now the fact that these receptors are located all through our bodies is part of the reason why marijuana has been found useful in treating certain medical conditions. All right, so now 2 of the cannabinoids that our bodies produce naturally, one is anandamide and the other is 2-AG. It does have a scientific name, but I'm not going to even try to pronounce it. So it's commonly referred to as 2-AG though. So these endocannabinoids that our body produces naturally, such as anandamide, function as neurotransmitters because they send messages between our nerve cells, our neurons, throughout our endocannabinoid system. Now, if you're anything like me, when I was sitting through this wonderful presentation by this super funny, charismatic gentleman, I still had no idea what he was talking about when I heard all that. And through doing research of my own, I found an article that had a very simple analogy and one that made sense to me, which was if we view our body as a house and our endocannabinoid system as the caretaker of that house, and then we view our endocannabinoids as the messengers to this caretaker. So for instance, if our hot, then a message is sent to our caretaker telling it to open the windows or turn on the air conditioner. And if our body gets too cold, the message is sent to the caretaker telling them to turn the heat on. Right? So now this is where endocannabinoids are unusual, is they can travel both ways between neurons. This is known as a negative feedback loop. And it's what makes our endocannabinoid system an essential system because it tells our bodies when to start a process. So if we are too hot, our bodies will start sweating, but it also tells our bodies when to finish a process. Otherwise, we would continue to sweat. So that's what makes it such an interesting system. Now, so how does cannabis work? All right, so cannabis works like this. THC, as Erica had said, is the psychoactive cannabinoid in the cannabis plant, one of them. It is responsible for that high feeling that we get. THC is very similar in chemical structure to anandamide, which is one of our endocannabinoids that is naturally produced in our bodies. Because of this similarity, the endocannabinoid system recognizes THC and allows it to alter our brain communication. So, while our bodies carefully measure out anandamide in order to regulate certain processes and make them run smoothly, THC floods our system and interferes with the brain chemical balance, sending too many or conflicting messages to that caretaker. Okay? So, how does cannabis affect the developing brain? Now, we have the endocannabinoids. Do you guys have any questions? Are we asking questions before we go?
Sure.
Okay. Are we good? Did the analogy make more sense than the other terminology? Is that okay? We're good. All right. So, how does cannabis impact the developing brain? Well, there are obvious short-term impacts to cannabis use, some of which we are all familiar with. As I said before, the CB1 receptors that THC binds to are densely located in various parts of our brain. So our amygdala, which is our fight or flight center, our basal ganglia, again, excuse my pronunciation if any of you are science teachers, or you, Karen, you can correct me later, which is responsible for movement, coordination, and balance. Our hippocampus, which is responsible for memory and spatial navigation. So the short-term effects we commonly see in youth when they use cannabis are reduced coordination, slower responses, both physically and mentally, losing the thought in the middle of a conversation, perhaps uncontrollable laughter, increase in appetite, bloodshot eyes. Those are short-term effects that we're probably familiar with seeing in our youth who are using cannabis. However, THC also also stimulates neurons in our reward center, and it to release the signaling chemical dopamine. So at levels much higher than would happen in response to natural stimuli such as food or music. This flood of dopamine is what contributes to the pleasurable high that recreational cannabis users are looking for. That's what they seek when they use. So along with other regions of the brain, THC also targets our prefrontal cortex, which is part of the brain that is under serious construction during our teen years or adolescent years. Now, the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain responsible for our executive functioning, so decision-making, emotional regulation, planning, reasoning, and problem solving. Now, the studies about the long-term effects of cannabis use and youth are not widely available yet because it's a very hard age group to research when combined with a drug or an illegal substance. So what we do know, though, our studies now show that our brains are continuing to develop into our mid-20s. So we're not reaching our brain maturation until around 25 years old. Now, during that time, a number of key neurodevelopmental processes occur. One crucial process is called synaptic pruning. So this is the process where our brain eliminates unneeded neurons so that it can operate most efficiently. Now, some studies suggest that what happens when we use marijuana or consume cannabis is that it disrupts these receptors, so the neurotransmitters involved in synaptic pruning, and as a result, the unneeded neurons that are supposed to have been phased out are left behind and can actually drag down our cognitive capacity and affect our memory and executive functions later on. Now, the studies that have been conducted so far heavily relate the age of use, the frequency of use, and the concentration of THC in cannabis, or THC in cannabis use as highly linked to the long-term effects of cannabis use in our teen years. So it's important to note that. Now, so that brings us to some statistics. Now, Canadian youth, a survey that the World Health Organization conducted, out of 43 countries surveyed, Canadian youth are the highest cannabis users, okay? From the Canadian Cannabis Survey in 2017, youth 16 to 24 years old are twice as likely to use cannabis than any other group. Males are more commonly used than females. Now, according to the Canadian Cannabis Survey, again, the average age of initiation is 18.2 years old. Now, that includes, an adult population that may have started using cannabis later on in life, but the Canadian study for tobacco, alcohol, and drug survey stated that out of grade 7 to 12 students surveyed, 16% had consumed cannabis in the past 12 months. Now, out of that 16%, the average age of first use was 14.2 years old. So that's out of just the student population that consumes cannabis. Now, I just want to make one more little point, and it's one that really sits with me, and it's one that Zachary Patterson has said, is that right now, because of legalization, and we have legalized cannabis for medical purposes for many years, but now it's been legalized for recreational use, our youth in Canada are being inundated with information about marijuana. Now, there's tons of messages out there in marijuana. It's in our music, it's in the news, it's on TV, it's all over social media. Now, these messages that they're receiving are usually of a positive nature, or are pro-marijuana in interpretation, saying marijuana is medicine, it helps me relax, it cures cancer, it helps my anxiety, it helps me sleep, and so on. You know, so what happens is when the perceived harm of a drug decreases, the rate of use of that drug is going to increase. So if our students and our youth's perception is that weed is safe, they're more likely to use weed. All right, so as adults, we really need to be aware of what our message to youth is around cannabis. So that's an important thing, you know, that I took away, is that it's important what we're saying to youth, or what the messages around to our youth are about cannabis. You know?
Alrighty.
How about the questions?
Perfect.
Well, I like your presentation, but like as I said, I know also friends who live in Ontario, and sometimes the rules are a bit different, and it's just like, and you still read the literature that say if you're less than 18 years old, you shouldn't use marijuana and all this. Like, so what is on the Quebec side versus Ontario? Like sometimes you talk about 18 years old, 21 years old, but you're talking now with Quebec Western School Board, obviously, it could be less than 18 years old. Like, what are the rules, like if you want to have a prescription, if it's under 18 years old, you can still have a prescription from your family doctor in Quebec side or Ontario, or how does that work with all these different rules?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because there's a lot of debate over that. There are some medical professionals that feel that no youth under the age of 21 should have a cannabis administered to them for medicinal purposes. There are other professionals that feel that it's okay. Again, we have to come back to that concept of THC versus CBD levels, right? Why is that student? And we have to realize, and we have to understand that there are some amazing properties about this plant. There are some things within this plant that are doing wonderful things for people, but it's not the getting high part. Okay, and I think that that's a big message when we look at that difference between recreational and medicinal, and that's where things start to get clouded, like Kelley was saying, because of, you know, like our youth are getting exposed to messages of like weed is safe, it's curing cancer, it's doing all of it, it's natural, all of this kind of stuff. So, but when we really look at it in terms of an effective means to you know, like solve a medical issue, that's really up to the doctors and under the doctor's ethics. So our police officer is going to get into the laws about it in just a few minutes. But in terms of like the medical profession, as far as I know, and maybe Karen can speak to it a little bit more, there's no sort of guideline in terms of who can prescribe what and how, and what is age appropriate, what is not age appropriate. So I'm sorry if I don't have a definitive answer for you. It's still sort of very much up in the air.
I think doctors are looking at it as the benefit of administering it to somebody whose brain is still developing outweigh the risks.
And they're still doing studies, actually.
Yes,
yeah.
for sure. And you know what? They're going to start doing more now that legalization has happened. Sure.
And I had another question related with what is the interaction of marijuana with other medication? For example, autistic children often they take risperidone, Abilify, or mirtazapine, or different medication. Like if ever you want to use marijuana as a medication, you should stop all the other ones, or there's a big interaction, or like.
That would be a much better suited question for a pharmacist.
Okay.
I really don't feel comfortable answering that question because I really don't know, right? And pharmacists, they're a very underutilized tool to us. So my suggestion, and often when I meet with reasons, or I think it's a health reason, I'm always like, does your pharmacist know? I don't even go to the doctor part. I'm like, is your pharmacist aware that you're taking Adderall, but you're also drinking daily and you're smoking weed every day? The Adderall might not be helping, right? It might be counterbalancing something. And people can go, like as an individual patient, they're able to go to their pharmacist and say, like, look, and just be honest with them. There's that whole room of confidentiality, and you need to go and you need to get that figured out, because if you're thinking about how it is impacting you, then you really need to make sure that you get that information. But I'm sorry, I can't answer that question for you because I really don't know.
Okay, sorry, last quick question I would like, the presentation is quite good and all that. Is this something that we're going to receive by email, or we can put a website and have access to it?
We can definitely make that accessible, and I think through communication with my communications officer and Connections, it will definitely be made available on our website, the WQSB website, through parent resources, and as well on the Connections website as well.
Okay.
Okay? Wonderful. So very, oh, yes.
Sorry, it's going to be super
No,
quick.
go to it.
Just to take it back just 2 minutes, what you were saying earlier, Kelley, about the disruption of the pruning that happens in the brain while it's still developing. If your brain is fully developed, let's say you're 35 years old and you use cannabis regularly for 20 years, can it cause those same issues even though you started once your brain was developed? Can it disrupt the amount of neurons that are active, not active?
So, again, I am not a neuroscience, but in the studies that I have read, it's not a long-term effect. The effects are more short-term effects in adulthood when the brain is fully developed.
Okay.
I mean, again, it totally depends on frequency of use and what the concentration of THC is. So, it's going to differ for everybody. But from the studies I've seen, if use is ceased, then usually it'll reverse the effects.
Thank you.
So just very quickly, guys, just again, sort of like a Cannabis 101, we've got 5 forms of cannabis. So as you can see, there's dry cannabis, which is the form that most of our students use, so they smoke it. We've got hash. We've also got hash oil. Next thing that's kind of maybe new for some of you is what we were talking about, concentrates, so THC concentrates. And right under there you'll see 3 words, so wax, shatter, and butter. It was quite funny. Our director general came and he goes, that looks like my grocery list. So these are just acronyms. These are just short-term street names, versions of these concentrates. So if you hear somebody talking about that they've got some wax or they've got some butter, it's not butter that's in your fridge, okay? So it's usually referring to a THC concentrate that they're utilizing. And I just want to highlight synthetic cannabinoids. So we've got spice and K2. This is a completely, totally chemically based simulation of cannabis. So when they say synthetic, it's truly, genuinely synthetic. There's everything that is a part of this drug, or these 2, spice and K2, is completely created in a lab. So the way that I would explain it would be cocaine coming from the coca plant in its original form, and then you have a drug like speed. Speed would be the pharmaceutical or the synthetic version of cocaine. I also explained that to our director general, and he's like, I got nothing. Okay. And I'm like, okay, sorry. That was too much. All right, sorry. So here we go. Just very quickly again, ways that to consume cannabis. So we've got absorption, and as you can see from our little pictograms here, there's creams, there's oils, there's lip balm, there's lots of different ways to get it into your skin. So gone are the days of, oh, they smell like weed. They smell like skunk, right? Nope, sorry guys. They're able to get it into their body in lots of different ways, and through the skin is one of them. All right, then we have edibles, and I just would like to point out, and I understand that my colleague Matt Coe is going to get into the law, but as it states right now, edibles are not legal in Canada. Okay, it is illegal to be in possession of edibles. So edible products, as you can see, we've got a nice little pot pizza there. But we also have cannabis ice cream, there's cookies, there's brownies, there's candies, there's lots of different treats, there's tea, there's soups that you can make. There's a huge industry out there, especially just in edibles. So that's another way for students or anybody in the world to get to consume cannabis. Then of course we have our atypical smoking and vaping products. So we've got some, as you can see, rolling papers and some different vaporizers and a bong and that kind of thing. So that's also another way to get cannabis into your body. So here's some really great resources. There are also print copies of those resources on the table over there, and of course you'll be able to quick link some of these once you get the presentation off of our website. These are websites that Kelley and I often go to. They're our go-to websites. I really like, and it takes a little bit of time and a little bit of planning, but I just want to highlight the Drugs Over Dinner website. It's really great. It's a discussion starter. It's how to have that discussion and how to start things. And of course, we know that breaking bread and eating together is a bonding situation. And that's sometimes what we need when we want to try to have difficult conversations, is when we sit down and we eat, right? Or we, have something fun to eat or something fun to drink. So I just wanted to highlight this. The other one little quick one I wanted to add is Mad Canada has this really wonderful impaired driving, I forget what the name of it is, Kelley, what is the name of their campaign? Weeding Out the Risk, which is a really, really great website for you to check out as well. And it talks about the combining of impaired driving and just impairment in general.